Hello again, and welcome back. Today we'll be listening to 4 new scary stories from Reddit. You can check the original posts from the description of this video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe for regular uploads of true scary stories and creepypastas. With that out of the way, let's start with the stories. I'm the crazy one. By the time is now, or is it? My entire life, I've always been known as the crazy one. If my mother did something awful and I brought it up later, I was misremembering or overreacting. Every time my father took a jab at me, I was oversensitive. Though when I told them about the voices I heard outside, they changed what they meant by crazy. Before, it was just a word to take me down a notch, but now, it was clinical. It was perfect timing too. It's easy to convince a child that their mistreatment is actually in their best interest. However, that is temporary, because that child will always grow up. But crazy? They could get a lifetime of use out of that one. Knowing that I would never be believed, I kept quiet about what the voices were saying. Our schedules, what's valuable in the house, etc. I even started letting them overhear the answers when I was on the phone. Sometimes I even gave them answers for questions they didn't ask. Like how our huge dog only slept in my room at night. And how the poor guy couldn't hear a thing between my fan and TV. Of course, my answers weren't always true. Like how my parents had tons of money and jewelry hidden in their room. When I woke up one morning to a quiet house, I felt a little smile creep up my face. I made a point to walk past my parents' room, even though there was a puddle of blood underneath the door. I didn't want to jeopardize all my hard work by calling an ambulance too early. Besides, I'm sure it was just my imagination. I am the crazy one after all. The Sun. By Alive Since '85. The cabin was exactly as advertised. Rustic, but modern. It was the view of the lake that lured us. The balcony made you feel like you were on the nose of a ship, sailing into the mountains. I kissed Monica there when we arrived, and we were having coffee there the next morning, when Bree told us about the man. What do you mean you talked to him last night? He was in my room. He told me it used to be his room. She was only 7. We tried to hide our panic with pancakes sporting funny whipped cream faces at breakfast. Meanwhile, I searched the property, and double-checked every door and window lock. The next day we were putting on sunscreen and getting ready to swim. I turned my back for a split second, and suddenly there was a man talking with Bree. He was clean-cut and well-dressed, younger than me and fairly unassuming. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I'm Greg. The property owners are my parents." "What seems to be the problem, Greg?" "Just checking on things." Later, in the water, Bree told me that Greg was her friend. That he talked to her at night. I asked what they talked about. "I'm staying in his room, and he checks on me." That night, while Monica was reading a bedtime story, I called the homeowners. The phone rang twice, then went dead. I checked the display. No service. I decided to try from the porch. Once outside, I saw Greg again. Standing knee-deep in the water, looking straight at me. I couldn't quite make out his face in the twilight, but I knew enough to know it was him. I raced down the stairs and across the yard, but the water was empty when I got there. I turned on my flashlight and looked for so long that Monica had to call me back inside. She reminded me that this was our vacation, so I kept the sighting to myself and tried to enjoy the evening. We had wine, watched a movie, fooled around on the couch, then fell asleep in front of the TV. I woke up to a draft. The balcony door was open. I leapt from the couch and ran down the hall. Bree wasn't in her bed. Monica was up by then, calling. We shouted her name, checked everywhere. I ran outside and searched the darkness with my flashlight. The light landed on her, in the water where I had seen Greg the night before. She stared into the light, expressionless. I ran to her, scooped her out of the water. She came back to me as if waking from a dream. Greg told me to follow him, she whispered. Afterward, a graying officer took our report. A local. When I told him about Greg, he laughed. That's just not possible, you see. Greg Timmons drowned in that lake about a decade ago. Autopsy by Ren 313. Subject is a 25-year-old male, Caucasian, 6 foot 1 inch, and 168 pounds. There was something about Jared that made me feel so comfortable. Growing up, I had always been picked on and excluded. I could never figure out what made kids inch away whenever I was near. Something about me, so prevalent but also so subtle, that no one could explain to me what it was. But Jared was weird too. Obsessed with the darker side of life. Sometimes, I wonder if whatever expelled the other kids actually brought us closer together. Signs of animal scavenging apparent. Subject was in the woods for at least a week. Jared died 3 years ago. A sudden, ruthless cancer. Sometimes, I wonder if his desperate desire to know about what happens after we die was somehow fueled by this hidden monster lurking in his cells. Near the end of his life, he convinced me to do this ceremony he found online. He was my best and only friend and he had weeks left, so I was eager to do whatever he wanted. The lead detective said he was found in close proximity to an 8-inch knife. I think it is safe to say that it was the weapon that was involved in the manner of death. The ceremony wasn't complicated. A bit of hair, salt, blood, and some other things. I don't completely remember, it felt so insignificant at the time. Just a small, albeit extremely strange, favor for a friend on his deathbed. And once he was gone, that night was all but forgotten. Identical cuts down both forearms, along with a cut horizontally across the neck, led to quick exsanguination. The subject died within minutes. After his death, I really struggled. I felt like I had left a part of me with Jared all those years ago. I was broken, tired, empty. I was ready to end it. I wrote a note, grabbed a knife, and went into the forest so no one could find me in time. I feel confident in ruling this a suicide, but I would like to look into the chest cavity to further examine the heart and lungs. I know now, that was a horrible mistake. During that weird ritual with Jared, something tainted my body. That night in the woods, I felt every single slice. I felt the cold ground under my body as I lay there, bleeding out for hours. I felt the wind and rain and sun, as each long day passed. I felt the mice and squirrels, and eventually bigger animals scavenge my body. I felt the coroner wrap up my body and deposit it into a truck, after some poor traumatized jogger found me and called 911. And now, I feel the cold metal of the autopsy table on my back. I can't hear, or move, or speak, or see. But, I can feel. And I know what comes next. I will now make the Y incision. Black-Eyed Child by Supacalafragalistic. A few years back I was awake laying in bed. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I'm usually the first one awake in my house on the weekend. I'm married, 3 kids. I remember this so vividly and clearly, because we were in the middle of painting our bedroom, and had the curtains off, and the room was blindingly bright. I was awake in bed for about 10 minutes. Just laying there. My wife asleep. Thinking of the day ahead, when I heard someone coming up the stairs. Our home is 120 years old, creaky original flooring. I've heard this sound hundreds of times from my room. Typical layout: at the top of the stairs one main hall, with all our bedroom doors branching off, mine being the last one at the end of the hall. I can tell which door in the hall someone is walking to with my eyes closed, and certainly know if someone is coming to mine, because I'm the last door. Oftentimes my children go downstairs for water early, and I assumed this was the case. I heard the steps coming up the stairs, and once they reached the top I could tell they were coming to my room, so laying still I turned my head to greet what I thought was one of my kids. What happened next is burned in my memory forever. A small head peered around the doorframe and looked directly at me. Maybe 3.5 feet from the floor. All I see is what looks like a boy with almost black hair, a disheveled bowl cut, white skin, and black rough cut holes for eyes. We were both startled, and it immediately dashed away. Till this day I don't know what launched me forward. My instinct was to either convince myself what I just saw and catch this thing, or find out it was one of my kids and I was hallucinating. It was literally 1.5 seconds between the time I saw it and me leaping to the doorway looking into the hall. The thing just vanished. I went into my daughter's rooms one by one and they were all very much asleep. I searched the house basement to attic, nothing. This house has many stories I could share here, but this one was unlike anything myself or my family have ever experienced. That's all for today. If you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share it with your friends and family. If you have any crazy story that you would like to share on my channel, send an email at horroxperiencemedia@gmail.com. You can find it in the description box too. With that, this video ends here, and I'll see you in the next one.